Good afternoon. It's Monday, the 3rd of April 2017, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. With me in the studio, Mike Robinson. And we're smiling. Where is time going? It's absolutely astonishing for us. And as Mike has just said, we're virtually a third of the way through the year.
No, quarter.
Quarter. Yes, that would be right, wouldn't it? So maths clearly not my strong point this morning. Or if you're listening from America, math, which I've always found incredibly difficult to pronounce. We are going to be talking about the police a little bit later in the news and pointing out some of the things that are going on that are clearly very wrong. Before we go there, praise where it's due. So we're going to come back onto the subject of Wiltshire Chief Constable Mike Veal. And we'd put up last week that his public letter talking about his Heath investigation, which had been a mere 1,500 views, was now climbing as a result of UK column publicity. And we're very pleased to say that this is the total that I picked up just before coming live with the news today. So this does show that when people retweet, when people share news and information, we can have an impact. But the statement at the top of your screen still applies. Doesn't this man deserve 500,000 views? Because he was forced to make this video letter because of the extreme pressure brought upon him and his investigation by the British government.
And sort of on this subject, I just wanted to highlight a couple of posts from my Facebook page, starting off with the Mike Veal video. That had 119 shares and 48 likes. Now, just a comment about the difference between likes and shares. If you share something, the people in your own network get to see it. If you like it, they don't. And the only people that benefit from a like, really, is Facebook, because they get to understand what it is you like and what it is that you're angry about and all these kinds of things. So please share these posts because that helps us. It helps us get some of this information out. And thanks to everybody that shared my note on my Facebook page about Brexit being nothing of the kind, drawing similarities between what Theresa May is talking about and what David Cameron was talking about in the run-up to the referendum. And of course, he was campaigning to stay in the EU. Theresa May saying that we're leaving the EU, but in fact the policies are identical. So what is the situation? And also thanks to everybody that shared this post highlighting the timeline that we now have up on the UK Column website on EU military unification, because as we've said before, you cannot be out of the EU unless you're separate and have sovereignty over your military. So thanks to the 100 or so people that have shared that so far, let's get these shared out far and wide.
And make a difference. That's the key bit.
So what are we starting with? Priti Patel. Well, on Friday we mentioned that Priti Patel wants to see the City of London establishing itself as a global financial centre for the developing world. Philip Hammond is jumping on this bandwagon as well. He's going to be in Delhi and Mumbai this week, pushing Britain's position as a world-leading finance hub, India's ambitious growth plans and the UK's vision to build a global Britain present an unbeatable combination for the two nations, Britain and India, to take their relationship to the next level. So he's going to Delhi and Mumbai with Mark Carnage. What has he to say on this? He says the UK is perfectly placed to be India's financial partner of choice, helping it to raise the finance needed for its continual rapid growth. And my message will be make in India, finance in the UK. So we're going to bring their debt levels to never before seen levels so that they can make the products that we should be making. Philip Hammond said, sorry.
Well, I was just astonishment at that bit, Mike, because I hadn't seen that before. Made in India, finance in the UK. All sorts of things went through my mind. Wasn't this how we destroyed vast amounts of Indian production years ago? And then we've got what's been happening with farming in India. But at the same time, we've got British businesses struggling as a result of financial controls and interest rates. What makes us so great to assist the Indians?
Well, look, this is about India's Make in India program, which is Modi's latest initiative. But Hammond says he wants to see India become a global manufacturing hub. He doesn't want to see Britain become a global manufacturing hub because Britain is post-industrial and post-manufacturing. We don't do that anymore. He wants to see India being the productive powerhouse, if you like. And as somebody has said in the chat box, I believe this is exactly there to scupper bricks. This is about the Belt and Road and what China's doing in Africa and in India, and it's absolutely there to scupper bricks. So that's what that's about. And then let's move on to this, sticking with financial issues, because this is HMRC apparently launching a criminal investigation into what they described as a global financial institution. This was on Thursday. They raided 4 offices in the Netherlands and in in Switzerland. So they're saying that on Thursday, HMRC, alongside our international partners, launched an investigation for suspected tax evasion and money laundering by a global financial institution. They claim they're getting increasingly tough on offshore tax evasion. They say they've collected more than £2.7 billion since 2010. And they say that with authorities in the Netherlands, Australia, Germany and France, they launched a criminal investigation into the suspected tax evasion and money laundering. It's an ongoing investigation, and HMRC are unable to provide further details at this time. That was what they said on Friday, unfortunately after our Friday news. Well, it turned out that in fact it was Credit Suisse that was the global international organization which was under investigation. And so Credit Suisse took out advertisements on Sunday in the Sunday Times, the Sunday Telegraph and the Observer. They said that they had a zero tolerance policy on tax evasion, and they said that they were responding to recent reports about tax probes in various European countries. There were 7 bullet points in their ads one of which was that they wish to conduct business with clients that have paid their taxes, and they continue to work closely with the local authorities in all matters, and particularly in this new case. So Credit Suisse not so excited about the latest scandal, but really, what are we looking at here? This is following on from the Panama Papers. It's following on with this agenda that we've been talking about since 2013 to create a globalized tax system. And so Credit Suisse just happened to be the latest sort of punch bag, fall guy, whatever you want to call them. It's not a real investigation. It's there to create public relations and push for a globalized tax system.
And at the same time, we can say, Mike, that the fraud and corruption in the higher levels goes on. I had a very interesting conversation with Elizabeth Watson the other night, and of course she suffered at the hands of major corruptions, so attempts to steal her property, but her own investigations are now leading her to looking at the top banks, accountancy firms, and of course what is taking place, the stealing of businesses and properties, can only happen with the full connivance of judges, the courts, and indeed senior levels of the police. So I think there's some very interesting stuff to come out on that. Links from her own investigation into Panama Papers as well.
Okay.
So we'll see what comes out.
Okay, well, we're going to move on to Yemen now. Now, just before we do that, I want to show this short clip. I'm going to talk through this. This is the Council of Europe. The Council of the European Union, rather, they have adopted conclusions on the promotion and protection of the rights of children. They're saying that these conclusions follow the guidelines for the promotion and protection of the rights of the child 2017, Leave No Child Behind. Some people may see the similarity to the No Child Left Behind United Nations policy, but anyway, let's move on. This was adopted by the Council on the 6th of March 2017. And with these guidelines, the European Union reaffirmed its commitment to comprehensively protect and promote the rights of the child in its external human rights policy. So in this video, as you can see, the EU recognises that every child has rights. They say the EU cannot accept that the rights of so many children around the world are violated and abused. They say the EU wants its policies to reach out to all children, girls in particular, and the EU supports all its partners to give special protection to those who need it the most, like in Yemen, for example. So this war in Yemen continues. 10,000 civilians killed, 3 million killed, or more than 10,000 civilians, yeah, and 3 million people displaced. 63,000 children died in Yemen last year, according to UNICEF. So how does that fit with the EU policy?
Probably fits very well. If you want to be deeply cynical, the objective seems to be that there are too many people on the planet, according to these people, so get rid of them.
Well, perhaps a little bit of good news, or is it? We'll see. This is the Guardian today, who've discovered that the Metropolitan Police is now looking into allegations of Saudi war crimes in Yemen. This is the SO15 counter-terrorism unit has revealed to a London human rights lawyer, apparently, that it has launched a scoping exercise into allegations of war crimes by Saudi Arabia in Yemen. And the Metropolitan Police have confirmed to the Guardian that the war crimes unit is assessing whether criminal prosecutions could be brought over Saudi's devastating aerial campaign in Yemen. Okay, that's a bit unfortunate because today Theresa May is off to Jordan, and tomorrow she'll be in Saudi Arabia. And this is the Prime Minister, as I say, first visiting Amman today and heading off to Saudi tomorrow. She's going to make it clear that that Saudi is a close and important ally, and that we'll continue to work closely in a range of areas, especially on counter-terrorism, where UK-Saudi cooperation is vital. So how these two things fit together, I'm not quite sure. What did Theresa have to say? It's clearly in the UK's security and prosperity interests to support Jordan and Saudi Arabia in tackling regional challenges and to create a more stable region, right? But this was the most offensive statement from this woman. In Saudi Arabia, we must never forget that intelligence we have received in the past from that country has saved potentially hundreds of lives in the UK. This woman is the most despicable, disgusting human being I think I've ever come across. How can she sit with a straight face and make a statement like that when tens of thousands of people, including children, are being killed in Yemen by Saudi Arabia using weapons we've provided, and she's heading over to Saudi Arabia simply to sell them more arms and put more profit in the hands of arms dealerships, arms dealers, arms manufacturers, and the Treasury?
Well, because they don't have any shame. She doesn't have any shame. There's no morality. What we're just seeing is that British politicians, representatives of their respective parties, and what are they out for? Trade.
Am I being too hard on her?
Absolutely not, in my opinion.
Yeah. Okay. Grooming children, sticking with children. The government has brought into force Section 67 of the Serious Crime Act 2015. It's now a criminal offence, they say, for anyone aged 18 or over to intentionally communicate with a child under 16 where the person acts for a sexual purpose and the communication is sexual or intended to elicit a sexual response. The offence applies to online and offline communication, including social media, email, texts, letters, and so on. People that are accused of grooming in this way will face up to 2 years in prison and will be automatically placed on the sex offenders register. And this new offence, they say, will allow authorities, including the police and the Crown Prosecution Service, to intervene earlier and stamp out abhorrent grooming before sexual activity can occur. Well, the NSPCC thinks this is great. They've said that the Justice Secretary is doing the right thing. Well, what did she have to say? Liz Truss said this new offence will give courts the powers to jail anyone who sends a sexual communication to a child and stop the process of grooming before it starts. She says, in a world of mobile phones and social media, our children are ever more vulnerable to those who prey on their innocence and exploit their trust. The best way of protecting our young people from the evils of child abuse is to stop it happening in the first place. If I saw any evidence that this government or this parliament or the broader establishment in the United Kingdom wanted to stop child abuse in any way, shape or form, then I might think that this was worth the paper it's written on.
I think this is part of a propaganda exercise which will We'll see why I think that in a minute.
Okay. Well, what did Peter Wanless from the NSPCC have to say? He said the Justice Secretary has done the right thing. This is a victory for the 50,000 people who supported the NSPCC's Flaw in the Law campaign. It's a victory for common sense. Children should be safe online as they are offline, wherever they are in the UK. This law will give police in England and Wales the powers they need to protect children from online grooming and to intervene sooner to stop abuse before it starts. As I say, this seems to me it's simply to prevent people freelancing, Brian, if we use that term, because the NSPCC is also doing absolutely nothing substantive to prevent the abuse of children.
Well, I think we've got to say something. There's something worse than that for NSPCC, and that is that abuse victims and survivors that we speak to simply laugh when the name NSPCC is mentioned, because they say we wouldn't trust the organisation with a barge pole, and yet this is the very charity that was sat alongside the Metropolitan Police, indeed taking phone calls from members of the public who thought they were phoning the Met Police to talk about child abuse.
And the independent inquiry as well.
And the independent inquiry. So this is a very insidious little charity which claims that it's doing wonderful things, but it seems to us the evidence from people who've been abused in the system is very different. The other point which I think we should raise here, Mike, is if we talk about grooming, of course it's the British government itself which is pushing in ever more graphic sex education for ever more younger children. So it would seem that whilst clamping down on crimes by people in the wider public arena, the government is very happy that it is grooming children itself through the education process.
Yeah, and let's not mention the children, of course, that are groomed through the care system in this country.
Indeed. Well, this caught my eye on the BBC News page today. A lot of items here, everything from President Trump, and I just happened to catch this little bit down at the bottom, and this is what it said, that Europe is now the hub for child abuse content. And I was fascinated that a story which is essentially about the abuse of children is now pushed sideways into the category of technology. It's nothing to do with children being abused. It's simply to do with what is circulating on the internet, and we should be concentrating on what's circulating as if the content is not actually child abuse. It's a fascinating piece of spin and propaganda by the BBC, and I found it deeply offensive, particularly as this is going on in the background. Now, just a reminder here that we've had a lot in the news that Google and Facebook and other social media providers are going to tackle terrorists and extremists online. So we've just chosen the Telegraph article here. But what are we saying? Google and some of the world's biggest internet companies agreed last night to create new technical tools to identify and remove terrorist propaganda in the wake of Westminster terrorist attacks. So this is all Google doing good work to protect the public. And The Guardian here, Amber Rudd showdown talks with tech firms on extremism are pure PR. Well, The Guardian being a bit more cynical, it's saying that meetings between the UK government and Facebook are more ritual than battle as they avoid subjects both parties disagree on. Tax is obviously an important thing, much more important than cleaning up the internet. Well, we were informed over the weekend of this, and the information is that the Holly Gregg Justice blogspot has been taken down by Google. It was taken down on the evening of the 31st of March. Apparently no reason has been given, and the site itself has had 1.7 million ordinary views and 5 million Google Plus views. So what is the Holly Gregg Justice site about? Well, of course, it's about justice for Holly Gregg, and in striving for justice for Holly, striving for justice for all other survivors of child sexual abuse. So we find it interesting that Google has suddenly turned its attention to this website. And remember, the focus of this is on Holly on the left-hand side, and her mother Anne, and of course Robert Greene, who's been to prison twice trying to achieve justice for Holly. So we wondered why Google would suddenly get tough on child abuse extremists. Well, the good news is that there is a replacement site up at the moment, but it's very thin on the ground, and I know that the people working behind the scenes are desperately trying to get basically the content they had previously up, but this is causing them some problem. Now, one of the questions that's being raised, it's speculation, but I think it's very interesting speculation, is what would have caused Google to take this action? And our attention is turned to these letters which Robert Greene's MP David Mowat has actually been sending out. There's 3 of them, and this gentleman has stood up to be counted on behalf of Robert. And let's have a look at what these letters say. So basically, this first one is to the Permanent Secretary of the Scottish Government, and it says, Mr. Robert Greene, as my constituent, recently came to see me to discuss a number of issues, and during the discussion he made reference to the fact he had requested copies of correspondence from your office, and that not only had this been denied, but that no satisfactory explanation had been provided as to why his request had been declined. And then the letter says, well, I'm therefore asking you if you will tell me why the material's been denied and why you've made this decision. Now, for an MP to do this adds a lot of weight behind Robert Greene's original requests. Let's see what's going to happen here. So we've got another letter here. Sorry, just bear with me at the moment.
It says, I understand that the above named constituent has been in recent communication with your office in order to secure the transcript of a case which he himself was involved. I understand that Mr. Greene has subsequently been provided with the transcript per his request. However, Mr. Greene has advised that the transcript is incomplete and that a section of the proceedings which he was particularly he feels is particularly significant to his case have been excluded from the text. So Mr. Greene is asking for that to be provided, and they're being asked why this has not been has been excluded. So
right, this is the key tape from one of the court cases that Robert Greene went through. So the Procurator Fiscal in Scotland now being asked to provide the tape which Robert Greene has been attempting to get. And we say again, this is really marvellous to see an MP standing up to be counted and now asking himself. Right, well, we go through because let's just bring this up. That's right, that's just the end of the letter. And Google, Scottish Government, well, this is a question being asked on the website that basically on the 4th of December 2009, Google got a letter from the Scottish Government, legal representatives threatening to take down the site. That was overcome, but what the website supporters are saying is that in 2007 they may have done the same thing again. So the inference is that the letters that have been sent to the Scottish Government have been so dangerous that the response has been for Scottish Government to contact Google. Now, there is another letter, and this is probably the key one, because of course what we've got here is Mr. Mowat writing to Nicola Sturgeon, and what he's saying is that his constituent Robert Greene has come to see him, pointing out that the Scottish Child Abuse Inquiry has now had a number of individuals resigning, and surprisingly the Scottish Government has simply replaced them with one individual, and how can that possibly work? How can you take an investigation which was supposedly going to have a team of people working, and then you simply replace it with Lady Smith? So the inference is that these letters have upset the Scottish Government, and particularly Nicola Sturgeon and SNP, to such an extent that they've called upon Google to take down the whole of the history, which of course has been up on that website, about the Holly Gregg case. I think there may well be some merit in this, because obviously the Scottish government has been prepared to act and attack Robert Greene in particular every time he started to make headway with questions about the Holly Gregg case. Now, just for completeness, I spoke to Google Media team this morning and followed up with this email simply saying, we understand that you've taken this website down, please confirm that, but also is it correct that this takedown action is at the behest of the Scottish government? So we sent that email off just before we came live. We haven't had a response yet, but it's going to be extremely interesting to see what Google says. So Google, publicly tough on terrorists, but behind the scenes, the inference seems to be that if you get too close to criminal activity at government level, you're going to be taken down as well. What can we do? Well, 22nd of April, we've got British Constitution Group meeting in Nottingham. Now, we understand over the weekend that a few people have said, is this just for British Constitution Group members? No, it's not. It's an open meeting. Anybody is welcome who is interested in the state of the country and what we can do about it. And as we've said over the last couple of weeks, the whole aim of this conference is to provide people with a very big space where up to 900 people can come together to meet each other, share ideas, expertise, and above all, be talking about what we can do to stop what is happening in UK.
Okay, Brexit, Brian, and over the weekend, Michael Hard demonstrated, is this a level of insanity that perhaps we haven't seen in politicians up to date, Brian? What was driving this, goodness knows, but here he is, Lord Hard, a former Conservative Party leader, and he was also Home Secretary for a time, and he was basically suggesting that we should use military force if necessary over Gibraltar. So are we going to go to war with Spain? What did he say? 35 years ago this week, another woman Prime Minister sent a task force halfway across the world to defend the freedom of another small group of British people against another Spanish-speaking country. So there you go. That's what we have to do. We've got to go and invade Spain.
It's mind-boggling, Mike, what is going through the minds of these people. We have Britain's armed forces, and particularly the Royal Navy, at just a disgraceful condition at the moment. We haven't got the carriers, we haven't got working submarines, we've hardly got any surface ships, and even the ones we've got are not going to have surface-to-surface missiles. And then this man is suggesting that we're going to go to war with Spain. Are they on drugs?
I don't know. But anyway, Jack Straw, because he's never invaded any countries, said the idea of Britain going to war or Spain going to war against Britain over Gibraltar is frankly absurd and reeks of 19th century jingoism. I doubt very much that Gibraltar will be a deal breaker. Boris Johnson said the sovereignty of Gibraltar is unchanged and is not going to change and cannot conceivably change without the express support and consent of the people of Gibraltar and the United Kingdom. And that's not going to change, he said, so nothing's changing there. And what was the Spanish response? Well, Alfonso Dastis, the Spanish foreign minister, said the Spanish government is a little surprised by the tone of the comments coming out of Britain, a country known for its composure in the past. Well, where is this coming from? And this is the question I'd like to ask, because it seems that this is mainly being driven through the Express and the people that are feeding the Express with information at the moment. This was Sir James Dutton, is it?
Yeah, yes. Indeed, yeah.
Who was Governor of Gibraltar up until late 2015 or so. Sold at Duff, Governor of Gibraltar quits after UK fails to stand up to Spain aggression. That headline, it's pretty insightful in itself. And then a year later, we had Brexit threat. Spain will take control of Gibraltar as soon as Britain leaves EU. So this has been something that the Express has been on for quite some time. Where is it going to go? Is this being used? Is Gibraltar going to be used as a bargaining chip in the so-called negotiations? Well,
possibly, but this rhetoric that's coming out around it, Mike, is I think just astonishing. And it's interesting that those earlier reports about Sir James Dutton were actually saying that he resigned because of political interference. So there's a different spin on it depending which paper you're looking at. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. But has Britain got armed forces capable of doing anything? Or perhaps they're suggesting we should nuke Spain. Maybe that's what the plan is. Well, let's turn to local Plymouth news. And we've got one of our Conservative MPs, Johnny Mercer, here. He's been in the Herald commenting on Brexit, why I've changed my mind over Brexit, and some very interesting language from this man. He says, excuse me, I remain relatively new to this game. I presume he's talking about being a politician.
Yeah.
I bought the statements on economic meltdown and advocated to stay in the EU. But that is the fantastic thing about being a servant to democracy. I'm not one of these who treat people like they are stupid, like Brexiteers in Plymouth didn't know what they were voting for. It was a fair fight and one side won, not mine. I'm really astonished by the language that this man is using. It's like something out of EastEnders. So he's new to the game. He thinks that politics is some sort of game that you get paid for. He bought the statements. He presumably didn't do any research into what they were telling him. It turns out to be complete nonsense. He then believes that he's a servant to a democracy. Yeah. Well, perhaps Johnny Mercer should visit the UK column and hear some of the stories from people who are clearly not living in a democracy. But of course, he shied away after one of his researchers got a little bit upset that we were quite direct in some email communication with him. So it was a fair fight. One side won, not mine. It's a bit of a game, Mike, really, yeah. Future of UK. And he goes on, though, the future is bright. We talk about how precious a gift our hard-won democracy is, but it's served us well. Let's keep fixated on our future. We as a city are in serious danger of fulfilling our potential. Our best days are yet to come, and I'm looking forward to it.
This is pure common purpose language.
This is pure common purpose language. Don't let's look at the problems we've got now. Let's think, let's fixate on the future, because in the future we're going to be living in utopia. No problem. We don't want to deal with the reality of issues now. I'm just astounded at this man. I think he's heavily reframed, but by the language, is he that bright?
Well, no, because, of course, if we take a serious look, an objective look at Plymouth, let's face it, Brian, it's not the most beautiful city on the planet. It's got a serious drug problem. It's got a serious employment problem. Anybody thinks that Plymouth is about to fulfill any potential of any kind is living in cloud cuckoo land. So I'd like to know what his vision for Plymouth is. What is this utopia he's trying to build? Because I don't see any progress being made whatsoever. Well,
it's an imagined utopia, Mike. This is how the reframing works. You're moved into everything is in terms of in the future, it's okay. This is in your head. Perhaps Mr. Mercer might like to start with tackling fraud and corruption in Plymouth. That's still a very big issue. Well, have a look at this story. Now, we've got to thank Guy Taylor for bringing our attention to this one. It's the Daily Mail. It's a really astonishing story about a couple that have had years of trouble with the police, Staffordshire police, and there's too much really to give you the full detail here on the news. I'm simply going to say that over a period of years, Staffordshire police went for Juan Gilly and his wife Julie, caused them all sorts of problems. And how did this start? Well, it started by Mr. Gilly being stopped when he was on his way to pick up a curry. He dared to overtake a police vehicle that was going very slowly. He's arrested. He's pepper sprayed. And then later on, he's accused of being part of a fight. This was clearly untrue. When he protested his innocence, the police simply continued to go for him. And eventually his wife tried to help, and then the police went for her. But the interesting thing is she was a police officer itself. So this is a couple of key comments from the article. It says, what makes this story truly alarming is the case was the culmination of what would appear to be a 5-year vendetta waged by Staffordshire police against Mr. Gilly, an entirely innocent man. Such was the determination of a force that Gilly's MP is described as out of control to get the man, and it even turns on the wife who stood by him. And it goes on to say that she was a serving police officer, but the harassment and brutality she experienced was so bad she had to resign. So
is this what this was? Some kind of spat within the police force that the police took this out on the family because somebody had taken umbrage at her for some reason?
Well, but the story starts with a husband, and so he is quite brutally treated by the police, and then the thing escalates to the extent that they're prepared to turn against one of their own officers. So anybody who's got any doubts about what the police are capable of, have a read of that story. And the good news is that Guy Taylor has actually been helping the family over the last couple of years, and he says it's really brilliant to see that they have come out ultimate winners, although they've paid a price in their suffering. And just a reminder here that on Friday we briefly mentioned Sean Ritchie's mum. Now this is a story that David Scott from Northern Exposure has been following, but this young man disappears under very mysterious circumstances, and when the mother attempts to get an answer out of Police Scotland, she's then brutalised and accused of wasting police time. I was able to have a short conversation with Mum last night, and I think there's going to be more information comes out about this, but it does seem that once again Police Scotland prepared to brutalise members of the public in order to shut them up and to stop them asking the wrong question. Now we're going to end on a rather unpleasant subject, but it's not the subject itself, it's what is behind it, which is the important thing. This was an article in The Guardian from a few days ago, and it says that Liverpool Mayor plans council tax rewards for dog fouling. Now, many people get very upset with dog fouling in the streets, and I fully support that and understand why they get annoyed, but it was what was going on behind the scenes here, because if we go to this part of the article, Joe Anderson, the mayor in Liverpool, said the plans were about boosting civil pride in the community. He said the reward scheme would apply to anyone who provided tip-offs, photos or video that led to a criminal conviction of irresponsible dog owners or fly tippers. And I'll just bring in this comment. Does Joe realise that he's helping to set up big society Stasi state? This is getting people to spy on each other, and this is the start of something extremely sinister within the big society initiative of the Conservatives. And I'm just going to bring up the picture of the bin again, because it's interesting that the bin that The Guardian has chosen to show is over full. And the reason I pick up on this is because it's very noticeable that in many parts of the country, including Devon, where I live, dog bins are not being emptied with the frequency that they used to, and therefore there's a frustration amongst dog owners. So we've got financial cuts, shortage of money means that we can't provide the public services people need. It doesn't mean that people should foul the pavements, but it is an unfortunate side effect. But don't worry, what we really want you to do is spy on your neighbours.
Generates revenue, of course.
And it generates revenue, yeah. Well, there we are. What can we say? We are astonished at the information that's coming into UK Column on a daily and weekly basis. Many people say to us, what do we think is happening? We think that a dictatorship is emerging in UK extremely quickly. How is this being put in position? Mainly by stealth. But as we can see from our own news, it's increasingly easy to give examples of how this thing is being put together. So UK big trouble at home, manufacturing, trains, potholes in the road, NHS, education, defence. But Prime Minister Theresa May is working abroad to advise India, and we are there to build a better globe.
And blow up other countries.
Yeah.
Yes.
Remarkable. Okay, that's it for today. Thank you for joining us. And don't forget, please share the information we push out, because that is the best way for it to spread. And if you haven't yet seen Mike Veal's open letter, please go and have a look at that YouTube video. And if you like it, share it. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.
All right.